that I think I wish I had reread that I wrote when I wrote this grant, was that we also want to instill science and the curiosity of science and environmental science, the natural sciences, because right now in the universities there is declining enrollment in the natural sciences. I think that, is it starting, or there has been, am I right?
Well, I don't know nationwide. Forestry nationwide is declining.
Yeah, yes. Forestry has. So it's also instilling that curiosity in the children in science,
the
in the natural sciences, the excitement, because it is so incredible. And even, you know, my daughter Nicole, she's not so into science. My oldest is, but my little one isn't, and it just really blows me away. How can you not like science? Because I've always loved it. But I really think it's the science teachers. If you get one or two really good science teachers, then you go, and then you fly, you're gone. You know, so if we can also, you know, create that excitement in the kids for what this is all about.
That reminded me of something. Emily Musto, who's a teacher here, was at Flag High last year, and she was in this program called Arizona START, which is a teacher-researcher collaboration. And she worked with us at the Ecological Restoration Institute last summer, 2009. And she had a lot of materials from that, and I don't know. I mean, she's a person right here on campus.
Yeah. I actually worked with her a little bit for her EnviroCon team. Yeah. Emily's a great resource that you have right here.
I'm going to talk about this because this is really neat, and you might want to use this in the production.
You could. I
mean, maybe not the exact one.
You doing this? This is going to be a play?
Yeah.
A performance?
Yeah, it's like an hour performance.
We do have a tree that's on a tree trunk that's on wheels.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. It's in the school of forestry.
I'll go check it out.
Has anyone used one of these or know what it is? What is it?
I don't know what it is, but I've used one.
What did you do?
Well,
don't ask.
You don't want to know what it is. When I was in elementary school, we actually went on a field trip to some forest somewhere outside of Flagstaff. I don't know where exactly, but we were able to use those, and those measure the life of the tree.
Yeah, you could say that.
Using a sample from the tree trunk, using it, and then you can see like the rings and the drought and everything, and how healthy the tree is inside.
Because you don't always have to cut a big piece of wood. That takes a lot of work, and it's not that great for the tree. This is like a drill. I mean, it's got threads on the end, and you turn this handle, goes into the wood, and it's a hollow tube. So a little tube of wood, as you drill it into the tree, goes into the middle. That really doesn't hurt the tree. You have this extractor thing, you pull it out, the sample comes out with it, and you have the tree. If you wanted to use it, I mean, you could put a tree on stage and take a cord from it. I don't know if that's good or not, but it is an action type activity.
We can make a
Or just something that you do, you know, I mean, it's just
He wants to and then they could keep it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was also had the idea, besides my rap song idea, I'll help you guys. Now Karen looks like she'd be really good at that. Is to audience participation.
Yeah, that
and
just came out.
That was something I think if you pull some kids from the audience, that would be really great. The other thing item I think I would love for Pete to cover would be a little bit on wildlife. Because I think that's another big issue, or, you know, we might have little bunnies or birds running around. And so I thought maybe you could just talk a little bit about wildlife, because I think that's going to be another big part of this.
Okay, so what is a wildlife? What is wildlife? What is a wildlife?
Naturally existing populations of animals and plants.
Animals, right? One reason that question is weird is that there's all kinds of different animals. There's birds, there's mammals, some of them are living harmoniously with each other, some of them are eating each other, etc. So there is no one thing called a wildlife, but there's all kinds of different species. And in any ecosystem, they'll use different parts of the ecosystem. So, like, what kind of animals use treetops? Where do they find their food there or live there? What kinds of animals do that? Birds, absolutely. What else? Squirrels, especially our Aberg squirrel, which is featured in that Ponderosa Deep book. What else? Insects, excellent. So a lot of times it takes people a long time to work their way around to like reptiles or insects or yeah, microorganisms, but they're all part of the picture too. What's a mammal apart from the squirrels that uses the treetops?
A cougar.
Maybe sometimes.
Bats.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, southwestern forests are incredibly rich in bats, and they often use parts, especially dead trees or trees that are partly dead that have a lot of loose bark. They go underneath the loose bark. In Austin, Texas, or wherever, they all live underneath bridges. We don't have any bridges. We've got forest habitat for bats. And so then there are other animals, some of those same animals that are making use of, say, the surface of the forest. So some of the things we were talking about of when you got a dense forest, a lot of pine needles, there's not much grass, not many flowers. Well, every species of grass, of shrub, of flowering plant has animals that depend on it. They eat it, they pollinate it. There's mutual cycles where the plant benefits from the pollinator, like bees or flies or hummingbirds, and then the animals benefit from the resources of the plant. So there's all these connections that are all connected to the overall health of the system. It's those kinds of things that we're trying to restore. There's some neat examples too. I don't know if you guys ever do field trips, but just right up the road here is the Fort Valley Experimental Forest, which is the oldest experimental forest in the country, managed by the Forest Service Research Branch, the Rocky Mountain Research Station, and the longest running restoration experiment, scientific experiment in northern Arizona is right up there, right off the highway. Or right up here in Schultz Pass, just up the road from the school here, you have examples of all these forest conditions we've been talking about. Old trees, dense young trees, changes in species composition, and a lot of different animals that make use of that canyon habitat. Not to mention the human side of things. So I mean, that made me think of it because all the people that recreate up here in Schultz Canyon, and bike riders and runners and campers and hunters. So the way that potentially another connection for students is just the way that they use the forest and how they would like the forest to be for them and when they grow up. Because we all use the forest a lot in Flagstaff.
And there are larger animals too on the ground. Cougars, what else? Deer, mule, yeah, elk. We have skunks, we have turkey. So there are just a ton of animals that use the forest, and some animals like a little denser forest, like the squirrels, and some like them more open, like the antelope. So that's why it's good to have a diverse forest across the landscape, where you will have some patches of more dense trees, but then surrounded by more open areas, and that's what we're calling, diversity, so we can support many species.
I hiked A1 Mountain this summer, and I know there's a really bad fire that just wiped it all out about 50 years ago, and it's starting to regrow, and it's really, really beautiful, especially ecologically, and I was wondering, how long does it take for wildlife, the animals, to become reintegrated into that? Does that happen as the forest regrows itself?
So are you, you're really, there was a fire called the A1 fire that burned 60 years ago, actually. That's what you're talking about? It looks like a big meadow now.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. There's starting to be some really great growth.
So those areas are interesting. There's two fires, the A1 fire and the Bell fire, that burned in 1950 and 51, which was the start of a big drought period, much like the drought period that we're in now for the last 15 years. It was like, that's whole life. During the drought. It's kind of interesting. And that fire was a crown fire, and A lot of trees were killed, and then after they were killed, the Forest Service went in and cut down the dead trees, so it's really open. They also planted some grasses in there. And on the edges, it's starting to fill in. There were also trees replanted into that fire, and most of them didn't make it. Because basically, without the forest cover, it's sort of drier, it's more exposed, it's just hard for these little seedlings to get going. So around the edges, it's starting to fill in. Middle's still a big meadow. It's used by all kinds of wildlife now because meadows are also an important part of wildlife habitat. So that diversity, or a lot of times people use the word mosaic, lots of different things in a mosaic on the landscape. That's pretty good. The thing that we're trying to do is recapture the natural mosaic and not have extremely large severe fires like that, much bigger than that one, that would basically lose a lot of forest for a very long time. The other thing about the regeneration is, what do pine seeds look like? You guys ever looked at a pine seed? You all know what pine cones are. Seeds are anything. They're pretty small.
It's about the size of a peanut. I don't know. Not a peanut. Yeah. Sunflower seed.
Yeah.
Once you get it out of the
But
shell.
unlike a sunflower seed, it's got a little, it's called a wing. A little papery piece around it. What's the purpose of that wing? What does that do?
Wait, doesn't it?
It helps it move through the air. It helps it move a little further than if it was just like a sunflower seed, it would pretty much fall straight down. But even with that wing, it's not like a dandelion seed. It's not going to go get in the wind and go for miles and miles. It'll go, a few hundred yards maybe at the most. More like, say, 50 yards away from the tree. So as fires get bigger and bigger and more trees are killed, the natural ability of the forest to come back is reduced because it's just hard, there's no more seed source. So smaller, that fire, even though it's a pretty big fire, nowadays is smaller. It's not like the Schultz fire. Smaller fires like that can recover a little better over time than really big ones. The slowest thing to recover, and the Schultz fire is a good example. So how many of you guys live on the east side who were affected by the flooding? Just one? Wow. Fortunate. So when that water came flooding off the mountain, was it clean and clear?
Oh no. Like it happened really suddenly. I was driving home from work and I had to drive through the flood to get to my house. And I was really angry because I felt like my family should have warned me that there was a flood in our road. And the first warning that there was water ahead is that everything smelled like soil. Like it smelled like you were plowing your lawn. And but you weren't. You were driving to a flood. And plowing your lawn. Don't touch me. But and it was just it was very dark. It was a very black mud.
So mud is a combination of water and
Soil.
and where's that soil coming from?
Mountain.
A mountain, and that soil formed over thousands. Soil forms by rock breaking apart, eroding, forming soil layers, plants grow in it, add organic material to it, all that. That's the slowest single process of all these natural things, of all the regeneration, fires, all these things we've been talking about. The formation of soils is the slowest. And in one storm event, you can wash the work of hundreds of thousands of years of soil development off of that mountain. And so that's really the biggest, longest term impact of these unusually severe fires, is that now for a very long time, geological time, some of these systems may not be able to support forests again, may not have that kind of productivity.
We just have about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions specifically that you have for any of the...
Who's actually going to be performing the
Actually, it's intro to theater, it's
Intro
middle
to
school,
theater.
right? Middle school?
No, high
Mostly,
school.
or it's mixed?
Mostly freshmen.
It's a
Mostly
freshman
freshmen.
and there's 5 sophomores.
Okay. And then also, the art classes are going to be working on the scenery and the props. So it's really a complete fall production. And Mr. Levin is overseeing everything Fall is doing, I think, pretty much, and Ms. Wilder. So.